I'm Eric Johnson.
And I'm Amy Rose White, LCSW, and my phone number is 541-337-4960. My website is arwslctherapist.com.
Today we're really excited to speak with Amy because this is a subject we haven't covered before, but a subject that in some ways we didn't even realize would be as important as it is, because it fills a hole in especially relationships with families on the divorce and family law front, but also in cases where even if you are a happily married or a family that wants to stay together and doesn't deal with those problems, you can still encounter strains on a marriage caused by
pregnancy and postpartum anxiety or depression.
So this works out great, because if you're in a situation where you're trying to preserve your marriage but you know you've got some fraying ends, or if you're in a situation where you know that this is just one of the last straws, either way, what Amy has to share with us is going to be very useful and very interesting. So where do you want to start?
Well, I'd like to begin by simply saying that a lot of the couples that I work with, which I predominantly see couples in my practice, and sometimes women individually, but I prefer to see people together around the time of pregnancy and postpartum, because a common complaint that I hear from husbands is, what happened to my wife? Where was the woman that I fell in love with? She's never been the same since we had kids. We're fighting all the time. We never have sex. Our life is about our children and surviving, and I can't take it anymore. And that's pretty common for most people who have children. It's really difficult to maintain connection in a partnership after we have kids because of the demands of child rearing. But sometimes there can be an even deeper level of illness going on.
Could I ask this too? I mean, what percentage of pregnancies are associated with serious postpartum depression?
It's a good question, and the answer to that is really shocking. It's around 18% nationally, and at least 13% of women in Utah will have pregnancy or postpartum anxiety and depression. And I mean by that meeting the full criteria of having a diagnosis and needing treatment.
Right. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just thought that was something I'd like to know about.
So it's a lot of people. It's a lot of families affected every year. And the sad thing about it is a lot of these illnesses are preventable and they're easy to treat if they're caught early. The sad thing that can happen in partnerships is if they go on for a really long time untreated, and maybe there's been some shaky ground in the marriage beforehand, that can be a recipe for disaster in terms of separation, conflict, and sometimes divorce, or even children being removed from women who are ill and have not been treated adequately.
Do you have an opinion on, do the courts, whether it be in the criminal side or the civil side and the domestic relations side, do they tend to have the wrong perception of postpartum anxiety and depression? Do they see it as something more nefarious than it really is? Do they treat it as a lack of self-discipline? Or do you see problems in the perceptions in the legal system?
Absolutely, and I actually am
I didn't know the answer to that question, by the way.
It's a great question.
I really wanted to know what Amy had to say.
I'm so glad you asked. So I am the Southwest Regional Coordinator for Postpartum Support International, and I run an organization here in Utah called the Utah Maternal Mental Health Collaborative. And we work as an international and state chapter organization to actually in part advocate for women in the criminal justice system who have had perinatal illnesses. Perinatal is a fancy way of saying pregnancy through the first year postpartum. And in the court system, whether that's in divorce or women who have unfortunately committed infanticide, which does happen, the courts are still just beginning to understand what is really going on in the mental health of those women. And I think sometimes a judge might have a good understanding of that, but more often than not, we really don't understand that depression looks different in women during pregnancy and postpartum. It's anger, irritability, rage, insomnia, anxiety, constant worry, racing thoughts. That's more common than feeling sad and kind of this non-functional picture we have in our minds of a mom under the covers not taking care of her kids. That's very rare.
On all of that, I mean, that's what you just described are the cocktail for a divorce in any situation.
That's right.
I mean, irritability and fighting and mind racing and insecurities and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm not surprised to learn that there might be a situation where someone says, you know what, this has gone on, like you said, for during the pregnancy, so almost a year, and then into the first year of this child's life. So the stress of a new baby alone can even put the best relationship at odds. And then when you see that your wife or partner is also just behaving in a way that you didn't recognize, it could be very easy for people, even reasonable people, to go, I guess this marriage is over. I guess this
Absolutely.
relationship is just irreparable. What do you say to people in that? To the husbands, and I guess to the wives in today's world. What do you say to those partners if they're saying, this isn't what I wanted, but I don't see any way out?
Absolutely, there is help. So the first step is recognizing when your partner or yourself isn't feeling like themselves, and reaching out and asking for help. And although I'm happy to share my practice information, the Utah Maternal Mental Health Collaborative, our whole goal is to improve access and awareness in the community so that we have providers that know what to say when we come to them. We call our OBGYN or a midwife or doula or a counselor even, because not many mental health folks actually specialize in this area or have expertise, that they know what we're talking about when we say we don't feel like ourselves.
So are you saying that they might actually they misperceive it or misdiagnose it?
It happens all the time.
You're kidding.
No,
Oh, wow.
Because one of the illnesses, there's actually 7 separate disparate diagnoses that can happen during pregnancy and postpartum that look different. So they're all in our diagnostic manuals. All therapists kind of know the labels, but we don't know how they look differently in pregnancy and postpartum. And so when I say the anger, irritability, rage, a lot of people can misconstrue that perhaps as bipolar if they're not well educated.
Okay, makes sense.
PTSD gets missed all the time. It looks like, it can look like depression. About a quarter of all women will have some symptoms of post-traumatic stress after having a baby. So the clinician needs to know how to rule that out. And women that have psychotic episodes where they are hearing things or seeing things that other people aren't hearing or seeing usually have an undiagnosed bipolar disorder. So a clinician, a provider.
Is it a temporary one?
No.
It's just exacerbated during.
Or they had their first manic episode. It was triggered by having.
Triggered by? Okay.
That's right, because we think those women have a hormone-sensitive brain that gets activated. Basically, the manic phase gets activated because of the hormonal fluctuation that their brain, in particular, can't handle. So if those illnesses aren't screened for, if a clinician, even a counselor, has a woman with symptoms and she doesn't know that they look different. Particularly a woman, even in the worst case scenario, I know this, you do family law, but in the criminal justice system with criminal defense law, women who have actually killed their children are usually psychotic. They are usually not intending to hurt their children. They usually have delusional beliefs that they're actually saving their children, often with a religious theme.
That's amazing. And do you see the court system? Let's just start there because we don't have to dwell on that. Do you see the court system generally treating people like, well, if you've mistreated or abused, and let's make that distinction. Sometimes it can just be you're just being kind of nasty, but you're not doing anything that would rise to the level of abuse. Certainly not the level of any kind of legal definition of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But in a divorce or child custody situation, do the courts tend to say, well, once an abuser, one abusive episode, always an abuser? Or we might as well put a big ring around you and make sure that you're never going to do this again? Or are they willing to say, look, this is an isolated incident caused by specific environmental and circumstantial factors, and she has a clean bill of health now, and she knows this could happen again. And by the way, once every pregnancy is postpartum. If you have it once, or you have it with every child, what are the odds?
Your risks are much higher, particularly if you weren't well treated and you don't go into your next pregnancy with a wellness plan. But it's not a guarantee.
Better than even odds? Better than 50-50?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, especially if it's not treated.
Okay.
If it's well treated, no.
So assuming that, then it's like, you could say, look, I'm a good person. I was a good person. I was a model citizen before I got pregnant. Then certain things that were beyond my control, like you say, the hormonal levels, things that were triggered, pathologies that simply lay dormant, have now been triggered, but that I'm not responsible for the bad things that occurred. You really can't say that it was just an example of me not having enough self-discipline or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do people buy that within the legal system, in your experience?
It depends on the strength of the legal team representing the woman and the timing.
You mean how well you can bamboozle the court?
No, but how educated sometimes the legal team is, and whether she's gotten treatment. I'm aware of more than one case where a woman lost custody due to severe depressive symptoms, where she hadn't abused the child, but she wasn't functional and able to take care
Lying
of the
around,
children.
sleeping all day long, stuff like that. And
Yes, or threatening suicide and
Yeah.
being in the hospital. And if the court's process moves along before she's treated, then sometimes those decisions are made they're made before a team can even explain what you just described.
And if I may, and what happens is, once that particular snapshot in time is used as the basis for the custody award, if you say, well, I've gotten better now, sometimes the court will say, well, that's just because you finally settled down or you learned your lesson, but you're not really a changed person. You're just now claiming that everything's hunky-dory because you want a second bite at the apple. So I can just, as I hear you saying that, that's important, because somebody might say, yeah, right now I'm at my worst. But that's not to say that I will always be, or even that I'm responsible. But if that's what the court's looking at that day, or that particular time when the trial arises, doing a better job in the future may not be enough to get the court to change its mind or to modify those awards.
That's right.
You've seen
with
that?
Tragic consequences, absolutely. Yeah.
For whom?
Well, for the mother, usually.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone else?
And for the relationship between the child and the mom that may be permanently severed because of legal decisions made preemptively. I always tell people, give a good 6 months of treatment before you make any decisions. Separation may be a good idea to keep everyone safe, to help people get perspective, for both husband and wife to get in individual counseling, and potentially couples if they are ready. But at least 6 months to see if symptoms can be managed, to see what this really was, what are we looking at before we make a permanent decision.
You raise a good point there. So if you're on the receiving end of this as the spouse, what can the spouses be doing to be supportive and also to make sure that they're getting the care that they need?
Right. Well, as we were speaking about earlier in the hall, about 10% of men will actually have postnatal depression. And I was just at a conference where a pediatrician was talking about his very severe postnatal depression with his son that lasted for about a year. So when men have a partner with these symptoms, they're actually at higher risk of developing depression and anxiety themselves. Men need to know that their partners are probably not crazy. And they need to send that information to their wives.
There's about an 82% chance that their partners are
It's
not
higher
crazy,
than
right?
that. It's higher than that.
Oh.
You know, crazy is a relative term.
I was using the 18% figure you gave
Oh, I
earlier.
see. Right. Well, even if you have a mood or anxiety disorder, you're not crazy. You just have a medical illness that needs treatment. And it happens. It's like diabetes. It's like breaking a leg. And if people have those things, we don't stigmatize them. We don't say, oh, you should just be strong and fix that leg on your own. We get them a cast, we put pins in. We certainly don't abandon people who need some extra care while their bones are healing. And that's what partners need. That's what women need when they're healing from these illnesses. They need time, they need patience, they need concrete support. That's why having an expert that understands how to talk about nutrition, potentially evaluating them for hormonal imbalances. They need a lot of rest. Sleep is the most important thing. Husbands, if you can get your wife a 4 to 6 hour stretch of sleep a night somehow, once baby is old enough to take a bottle, whether that's formula or breast milk, that is the key to mental health. Women tend to muscle it out, thinking that they can just be the only one feeding at night for hours on end. If you have a colicky baby, we see higher divorce rates in families where there's colicky babies or babies with medical needs, premature infants that spend a lot of time in NICU.
What does colicky mean in the modern world?
Crying, fussy, hard to console, not happy. You know, the opposite of the grandma says, oh, what a good baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no such thing as a bad baby, right? But there are more easy babies and more fussy babies.
What if you're a couple that they've had their first child and they have moved away to go to school or a job, so there's no family? They're not religious, or they're not in a suburban neighborhood or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm giving you a worst case scenario just because.
I see it all the time.
Yeah, what can those people do? What can the mother do? What can the father do?
Well, one of the great benefits of technology is that there is a lot of online support, and there are books and resources for women that do find themselves isolated. And Postpartum Support International has free volunteer coordinators in every state in the nation and almost every country in the world. I am one of them. We are actually all survivor moms who've experienced depression or anxiety during pregnancy or after having a baby. So any mom who's isolated can, for free, pick up the phone. She can go to postpartum.net. She can click on her state, and she can find a list of women that have been where she is in some respect, and she can talk to them for free. So that's one thing. And if you go to the Utah MMHC...
and can the husbands too?
Of course.
They can go to the same resource?
Yes,
Okay.
they can. And the Utah MMHC website, which is the Utah Maternal Mental Health Collaborative, has Many pages and pages of resources for online support groups, blogs, books, different resources for mom to do healing on their own. So between PSI and online support, women don't have to suffer alone.
But I'm so embarrassed. I was always known as someone who had it together, and everybody was so excited for my first child, and I am a wreck, I am a mess, but I'm just barely keeping everybody fooled. I can just pull it together long enough where I can get my hair done, and I can toss on a fresh pair of clothes, and then I go out and answer the door, and I may wave to a few people, and then I go back in and I just collapse. So tell me how I can do this without anybody knowing that I'm going through anything at all, because that's what I want. I want to keep everybody fooled. Can that be done?
Well, the irony and the danger is that is exactly what women do every day.
No.
In fact, when I give trainings to people, I often say that the better a woman looks, the more I'm worried. And we call them hidden illnesses for a reason.
So what do you say to those women? Because I will see them in my line of work on either side, either as my client or either as the person on the other end, and it's just like, man, you're making this too easy, honey. So what do you say to these women that say, and hey, we all have pride. I'm not claiming to be, better than everybody else, but we all have our egos, and there are certain people that will just say, if anybody had any idea how much I'm struggling. My mother didn't have postpartum depression, and she had 400 children, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So what do you say to these women that are really struggling and just think that I just don't want to appear to be broken? What do you say?
Well, the first thing I say is you're not alone, and that every woman who has felt this way has had the same fear of feeling broken, of appearing broken, of not measuring up to the neighbors or the other members of a ward or wherever they see women living the perfect postpartum life that they have in their mind. Certainly we see media images constantly that give us the impression that parenting is nothing but fun. And we also have this expectation as women that we look and feel and act as though we've never had a baby the day after the baby's born. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure on women. So I actually give women permission to fake it where it's safe, because it's actually not safe to go to a mommy and me group and say I have postpartum depression. You're not always going to get a happy, healthy, supportive response. So that's why going to a support group, which is also listed on our website, is a great idea, or reaching out online, or reading a book like the Mother to Mother Postpartum Depression Support book, where you read stories of real moms.
And not to compare these, but like Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's confidential, are these groups confidential?
Yes.
So it's a safe place where you can go and you can
That's
lay
right.
yourself bare without worrying about it getting out?
That's right, and we have 7 free support groups in the Greater Salt Lake area, all listed on the Utah MMHC website. So your question is a really good one, that in essence we're asking women, look, find safe places and tell the truth. Find somewhere, write in a journal, find a counselor, tell your clergy, talk to your husband, talk to your partner, tell the one girlfriend in your life that you think won't be judgmental. Tell somebody. But it's okay to not share that with everyone, because not everyone's going to get it.
And I think we could both say there is somebody like that in everyone's life. They may not come to mind immediately, but there's going to be somebody. If you don't have a good relationship with your parents, then there's going to be a friend. If you don't have many friends, or you're away from your friends, there may be clergy, there may be somebody in a church that you've never set foot in that would still be willing to help, because that's what they've devoted their lives to. You can find the help, right?
Keep reaching out, that's right.
And you can certainly find what's helpful here, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time. You're so articulate. You did such a good, really, I mean, you covered everything so well, and I felt so comforted just sitting here, and I don't even have to worry about this problem myself. So I appreciate you doing that.
My pleasure.
As we wrap up then, for anyone that has taken from this something that they would like to talk to you more about or get more information, could you just give your contact information one more time?
Yeah, again, my first name is Amy Rose, my last name's White, and it's 541-337-4960.
Thanks again.
Thank you.